viewers. So thank you so much for joining me today. And our question for today is going to be, can I teach my child without all the singing and dancing and games, bells and whistles and fireworks? Can I teach my child without all that extra? That has been a question that has been proposed to me so many times. And more recently, since I've started my kindergarten prep program and my reading success program, parents are asking me, how are you sitting and doing this with your kids? How are you doing it? It doesn't seem like they're having much fun. You don't do a lot of singing. You're not using pictures of different items, the animals. You're not playing any games with them. How are you doing this? Can I teach my child without all the bells and whistles? And the answer to that question is yes. Yes, you can. And it's more beneficial. So today I'm going to go into details. We're going to do a whole pros and cons list. So many parents have asked me this question, and I want to go ahead and make a video just to address all the issues. And we're going to go through the pros and cons list together. So if you're trying to teach your toddler, or you're trying to teach your pre-K student or kindergarten student, or even if you want to start even earlier with your baby, between 0 to 12 months or 12 to 24 months, and you're trying to figure out how can you teach them effectively, intentionally, and have the results that you want, stay tuned, because we're going to go over all the information today. For those who do not know me, my name is Kelly Austin, and this is Teaching for Tots. Yes. Okay. So we're going to answer this question. I know a lot of parents, first of all, I want to say I'm not doing this for the likes. I know this is not going to be something that a lot of parents are going to, expect to hear, especially parents who, who may have multiple children at home, or who may have had a child that already went through school and things of that nature. But what I'm telling you is true. You can teach your child without all the bells and whistles. And something that parents have told me is, well, Miss Kelly, I feel like I'm in competition. Like, I want to teach them this. I want them to learn this. But how do I get them to learn this when they have things like the iPad and the TV and YouTube and songs and CDs and different games that I can just kind of give to them and they can learn through that? Those are great ways of learning as well. But I do not recommend that being your first way. I don't recommend that being your go-to, your main source of learning. I do not recommend that. In my program, and not just in my program, but my own personal kids outside of Club S.M.I.L.E.D, I do use games and I do use some fun tactics, but that is not my go-to, nor is it my primary. So, for example, I'll give you guys a nice breakdown of what I do with my kids in a short version. My personal kids and the kids that come to my program, I teach them intentionally. What I mean by that, what do you mean by that when you say intentionally? I'm going over the information that I want them to learn, and I'm going over it in either a one-on-one setting or in a small group setting. I'm teaching them in a way that they can actually understand the information, and I'm going over how I want the information to be processed. I'm not just giving them a toy or putting on a song or some dancing activities or something like that and expecting them to just pick it up or hoping that they pick it up, because that's kind of what Learn Through Play does. So the goal may be to learn your alphabet. The activity may be a song. The results may be learning, for sure they're going to learn the beat. The results is going to be there for sure to learn the beat. They're going to learn the rhythm. But they may not learn the actual alphabet. They may just be really hooked on just the song itself. An example of that is kids with their ABC songs. So I know a ton of kids who came to me and I say, Mom, do they know the ABCs? And they say, yes, they know the ABCs. Say your ABCs. They start singing. And I say, oh, okay. And then I say, well, what letter comes after C? And they say, either they say nothing, or they have to start singing the ABCs and trying to figure out what letter I'm talking about. First of all, they have to figure out, they have to identify in the song, okay, what letter is C? And okay, then after I finally figure out what letter C is, then they're trying to figure out what letter it is that, to answer my question, what letter it is that come after C. Do you know what I'm saying? So you just, it's not intentional. It's literally filtered. That's the best way I can explain it to parents, is when you do learn through play, or when you are trying to teach your child through like songs and dances and activities and TV shows and all these different things. Yes, they pick up on some things, but the results are not the same. They're just not. Over a long period of time, so let's say a child watches the same show every day for a full year. They're going to pick up more, clearly, after watching that show. Matter of fact, by the end of the year, let's say it's an ABC show, at the end of the year, they may actually know their full ABCs. But what I recommend to parents, and what I do with my personal kids and the kids in my program, is I teach them intentionally in such a way that they can learn their ABCs in as short as 30 days. So you guys will be seeing the new video that came out. It's already on Facebook, but I will be adding it over to YouTube as well. And Gabriel just turned 2 in January, for those who've been following me. He knows all his sounds. He knows all his letters. He knows all his sounds. He can go through any letter and he can tell you what letter it is and what sound it makes. Why is he able to do this? I do it intentionally. I'm not expecting him. When I do fun and games, it's to practice. And that's what fun and games honestly is meant to do. It's meant to teach your child to practice. It's to reinforce what you've already set down with them and taught them. Nothing beats intentional teaching. Nothing beats it. Because you know exactly what your goal is. And then you know exactly how to get the results that you want through whatever teaching style that you decide to use. Whether it be flashcards or an exercise or writing the letters out, but you're able to be intentional instead of with all the distractions and all the confusion and their minds picking up so much other information. Because when kids are small, and if you've ever watched my videos before, I talk about the brain a lot in the first couple of videos when I came to YouTube. And basically when kids are small, their brains are rapidly growing, at a very fast pace. They're growing and they're picking up so much information. And so if you can imagine, when they're trying to learn a new, whatever it is, whatever new skill it is that you're trying to teach them, when they're trying to learn something new, let's say like their ABCs, all this other stuff that's going on in the TV show or in the iPad or, you know, in this song or in this dance, let's say you're doing like, I don't know, Ring Around the Rosie, and whatever letter they fall down on is the letter that you want them to reinforce. Those are great practice skills. But what it won't do is, it may be hard to introduce that to them. It may be hard to really give them the information that you want them to give, because they have all this other noise going around in their minds. You know, they're looking at the colors, they're listening to the sounds, they're listening to the rhythms, they're watching the dancing. If they're watching a TV show, then there might be commercials, there might be shapes, there might be animals, you know, there's other sounds going on besides the letters and the letter sounds. There's dancing, there's music. It's just so much going on, so much commotion. And honestly, if you're teaching intentionally, you can actually do it at a shorter version. So when I teach parents and they go through my parent coaching program and they realize I teach them the way that I teach my students and my kids at home, they're like, oh my God, Miss Kelly, this was so much easier. It's so much easier because it can be done in a so much shorter time. It can be done with as simple as 10 minutes a day. I taught my kids, all of my kids, their letters, their numbers, and I mean mastering it. So that means they recognize them, they know what they look like, they know what comes before and what comes after. I taught them numbers, letters, shapes, colors, all in 30 minutes a day. That's it. We touch on all those areas with just 13 minutes a day. And my kids, if you watch my videos, they don't know the basic shapes. They know all the shapes. They know octagon, hexagon, you know, they know crescent, they know semicircle, you know, so they don't. And as you see, this is the board that we actually use. If I can get it off here, which I may not be able to. Oh, I can't get it off today. I haven't been taking it off lately because my kids are already past this area. But if you can see, they know all these shapes, which is quite a few shapes. It's the 2D shapes and the 3D shapes. So my kids don't work on just like maybe the basic 6 shapes that most kids do. But at 3 years old, my son, Isaiah, knows all those shapes. At 2 years old, Gabriel, he knows all the 2D shapes. Numbers, same thing. We don't do the numbers with just 1 through 10. My 3-year-old can count to 50. He can recognize the numbers with the exception of 3 up to 50. Same thing with Gabriel. Gabriel can count to 20. He actually he can miss around and kind of get up to 50 as well, but he misses 30, 40, and 50. But the numbers in between, he pretty much got those as well. Now, as far as recognizing those letters, recognition, I would say he can only recognize up to 20. But at 2 years old, this is what he can do. But it's not because of TV shows and games and things of that nature. It's because of the intentionalness that I use when I am teaching him. So I'm very intentional when I'm teaching him. And that is the key to teaching any child, any toddler, honestly, it's really the key for any child, period, no matter how old they are. But if you want to do a toddler, or you want to teach a child that hasn't entered kindergarten yet, and you want them to just suck up all this information, it's better to be intentional. That is definitely number one. That's definitely number one key. Number two is just to be consistent. So if you're only going to do 5 minutes, do 5 minutes every day, or 5 minutes, 5 days a week. You have to do it you have to be consistent in doing it. You can't just do it once a week, or do it for a week and then stop doing it, or do it for a month and then skip around. Like, you have to be consistent. And not only you have to be consistent in just what you're doing and the time amount that you're doing it, but you have to be consistent in the lesson that you're doing. So if you want to focus on the alphabet, you can't focus on the alphabet for 1 week and then say, hey, I'm gonna throw in some numbers today, and 3 days later, for the next 3 days, don't do numbers, and then 3 days later decide, okay, I'm gonna throw numbers in here again today. You want to be consistent. And so that's what I tell parents. If they want to do a schedule, I recommend focusing on all four. And they're like, well, Mom, are you sure, Miss Kelly, you want me to focus on all of this with a 2-year-old, or all of this with a 1-year-old? I'm like, yes, because their brains can handle it. Especially if they don't have all that other chaos and all that other drama and that extraness. They can handle it, and they will learn it, and they will master it. They will master it. My 3-year-old is, if he was to take a kindergarten assessment, he is kindergarten ready. Everything that he needs to know to go to kindergarten, he knows at this point. And he's known it since he turned 3. If not even a little bit before 3, to be honest. But our goal is not just getting them kindergarten ready. We want to teach them how to learn. So let's go through the pros and cons so you guys can know what I'm talking about and be just a little bit more in love with teaching intentionally. So let's go through the pros first. Now, this is what people tell me all the time when it comes to the pros of teaching. The great thing about the fun and the music and the bells and the fireworks is that it is fun. It's fun, so it makes kids kind of want to do it. Especially if they're not kids that belong to you, or if you're getting them at a later age. So sometimes when kids come to my program, Club S.M.I.L.E.D, kids are a little bit older. They're like 3 years old or 4 years old, or they might be 2, but a lot of times they're a little bit older because mom or dad has realized, like, hey, they're going to go to kindergarten soon and they don't know this, they don't know that. Let's put them in somebody's program so they can learn the things they need to learn in order to go to kindergarten. And so when I bring those kids in, sometimes I do have to do a little bit of fun and play because that's what they're used to, unfortunately. And it's hard to kind of just give a child something completely different when they've been used to or accustomed to a certain kind of learning, when they've been taught to learn through play. So that's one of the pros, is it makes kids want to learn. It makes kids want to join in. Another pro parents say is this a good distraction? You know, if mom is a single mom, or if parents need to have a date night, or they need a moment to themselves, or they want to eat dinner in peace, or they have to get some work around the house done and the kids kind of need to still be learning, but, you know, kind of distracted, they can give them some learning tools that will satisfy their attention as far as keeping them distracted, but also while they're doing it, they're learning. So yes, that's another pro. Another pro that I hear a lot of parents tell me is that their kids do learn some from it. Now, I hear this more from girl parents than I do boy parents. So I specialize more with boys, and though I've worked with boys and girls, and I've done studies on boys and girls, and I've read statistics on girls and boys, but learn through play seems to be more successful for girls than it does for boys. Because unfortunately, the things that boys are wanting to play, honestly, typically are not so much of learning. They're not honestly learning tools. And when they are learning tools, they're not always focused on the learning piece of it. Unfortunately, sometimes once again, the distractions get to them, and they maybe focus a little bit more on the colors or the bright lights or the song itself. So, and it takes a little bit longer to kind of maybe suck up that information. And so the filters the filter holes seem to be bigger when it comes to girls. So girls get to suck up a little bit more information, and they're absorbing more information through the filters of play. Then with boys, the holes seem to be smaller, and they're still getting information, but they're not getting as much. So that's just my experience. But I would say those are the biggest keys. Those are the biggest pros that I've heard from parents. Now, let's talk about the cons, because there's a ton. But the biggest con is the fact that it's not intentional. It's not intentional. So you may not, you won't always get the results that you want. That's just the reality. You won't always get the results that you want. And it takes longer. In reality, it just takes longer. It takes longer for them to actually master the skills that you want them to master through song and play, because it's the rhythm, it's the beat that they're memorizing. That's what their muscle memory is memorizing. And so you may not be able to master what it is that you want to master in that area. Okay. The second con is that, especially for little boys, it affects their attention span. So when kids get to kindergarten, there's so many kids. When I was working in the county system with teachers would tell me that they have so much trouble with little boys when it comes to sitting for a while, or reading, listening to a book, and not even actually reading the book, but just listening to it. They pick a book over 5 or 10 pages, that by the 5th page, the little boys are up, they're bouncing around, they're dancing, they're doing this, they're antsy, they can't sit through it. It affects their attention span. Now, this is true for girls and boys, but I see more of it with boys. And so I definitely tell parents, try to stay away from it with boys. Please try to stay away from it, because it makes it hard for them to learn. You're not teaching them how to learn that's going to be successful for them later in life. Now, the reality of it is for all kids, when it comes to learning, if they learn through play, for all of them, it's going to come to an end. Because when they get to kindergarten, it may not be as much learn through play. I've worked with teachers who do a lot of learn through play for kindergarten, and then I've worked with teachers who do none. I've worked with teachers who insist on learn through play because of their class load, or because of the amount of students, or whatever the case might be. But then I've worked with other teachers who are like, it just doesn't set them up for success, and they're not learning as much. And they see by the end of the year that kids came in at maybe 50% and they're leaving out at 50%. Or they came in at 25% and they're only leaving out at 35%. And so they want them to master as many skills as possible in kindergarten, especially with the loads that they have as far as teachers go. They have large class loads. On top of it, you never know if they have behavior issues in that class, and that takes away from learning. And unfortunately, a lot of kids who learn through play and who kind of need that entertainment and need that excitement and need that that jazz, that whistles, of those whistles and bells and fireworks, those kids have a little bit of a hard time reading or studying or doing activities that help them with mastering their skills independently. So they have a hard time working independently. Okay. Which brings me to my next con. The next con is they have a hard time working independently. They really do. So a lot of people say, well, your 3-year-old, he's reading now. He's writing. He's beginning to write letters. He writes shapes. He's beginning to go to the tracing phase where he's able to trace something correctly and things of that nature. And I tell them, he's like that because I've already taught him how to learn. So when we do fun activities, he enjoys them, but he doesn't need them. So I can teach him something without all the bells and whistles, as if I would do a 5-year-old who's used to learning at this point. I can do the same thing with him. And when I need that alone time, or when I need that work time, like how when I come into my studio or I come into my education room and I'm making videos and things of that nature, I can have him sitting at the dining room table working on work, practicing the information that I've taught him independently at 3 years old. Now, the reason why I'm able to do this is because I've already taught him how to work independently. I've taught him how to sit and listen and pay attention. I've taught him these skills already. And so now all he's doing is practicing these skills. Now, can I leave him there for an hour? Absolutely not. He's 3. So he's still 3. But I can leave him there for a half an hour. It just depends on how much I've already taught him. So when he first turned 3, I probably could only do it for 15 minutes. But what I do is every month I add a couple of extra minutes, so that by the time he's 4 years old, he will be able to sit for an hour. And we've been to practice it over and over and over. And then I'll up the time again by the time he's 5 years old. And this is just a routine and a practice that a program that I've developed and a skill that I've developed for teaching my kids and teaching parents to teach their kids, honestly. Because I completely understand you need time to yourself. All parents need time to themselves. And it's not realistic to be teaching all day. You know, it's just not realistic. But we also want our kids to be advanced. We want them to have all the skills they need to be successful when it's time to go to school. And unfortunately, school is not all play. It's just not. There's some things that they're going to have to do, and they're not going to want to do it. And they need to have the ability and the skill to say, hey, it's time to sit. It's time to focus. It's time to write. It's time to work. They need to have the ability to be able to say, okay, the teacher's talking about this and this and this, and be able to comprehend it, suck that information up, be able to apply that information, put that information into use. They need to have the ability to be able to do such, because when they go to first grade, it doesn't matter what school they go to. By the time they go to first grade, they're not playing a lot. They're just not. And by the time they get to fifth grade, they don't even have recess anymore. Most kids, by the time they get to sixth grade, are not having recess anymore. And so they have a real work day. And what it does is, why the schools do this is because it really prepares them for real life. You just can't, sometimes you're going to be bored with school, but you have to teach your child to enjoy it. You have to teach them and give them the skill that's necessary to be able to sit through and understand it and still have that love for it. And another thing that helps with kids in this area, honestly, is seeing parents do it. If they see that the mom enjoys it, then they will enjoy it, because they will think it's normal. And so that's why I tell parents, parents that I'm working with, I always tell them, the best way to teach your child to learn is to start early on. Now, can you start later on? So if a parent is watching this video right now and they're like, oh man, my child's already 2 years old and I am having some of these issues, what can I do? Just start now. There's no better time. If you're watching my videos, you'll know I tell you guys this. There's no better time to start when it comes to teaching your child than today. Start today. And at first you will have some rebelliousness. At first you will have some issues. At first it will look like it's not working. But if you're consistent and if you're intentional, within 30 days, you can make it a habit. And their attitude will change. And after that, you have to just be consistent. You have to be consistent, you have to be consistent, you have to be consistent. Because teaching them intentionally really is the best way to set them up for success when it comes to school. And so those are just some of the cons. I didn't go into all of them, but those are definitely some of the cons that comes from doing all the extra when it comes to teaching your children. And I definitely understand why a lot of educators, especially preschool teachers or pre-K teachers or kindergarten teachers, I definitely understand why they do a lot of learn through play, because sometimes that's the only way they can suck those kids in, especially if they come from homes where either they are not doing a lot of educating at home, or they are just, that's the only way mom knows to kind of teach them at home or something. So I completely understand it for educators. But parents, if you can, which I know you can, teach them intentionally. Teach them how to learn. Teach them in an effective way so they can be able to suck up all this information and be successful. Because that's what we want for our kids. We want to give them the best head start as possible. And this will give them a great head start. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you guys like, make sure you guys comment, make sure you guys subscribe. And I will definitely see you guys soon.